There are moments when the entire entertainment world seems to shift at once, and right now, everything is circling around one man. In just a few months, Diddy went from an untouchable icon to the center of one of the most chaotic storms the industry has ever seen. Allegations spilling out from every direction, old associates stepping forward with stories they once kept buried, and a billion-dollar legal battle that has everyone wondering what comes next. What's made this moment so explosive isn't just the accusations themselves, it's how many different corners of Diddy's past are suddenly colliding at the same time. A fight over Biggie's legacy. A Netflix documentary that millions watched within days. Whispered claims of behind-the-scenes pressure, secret agreements, and people who say they stayed silent for years out of fear or loyalty. Even now, rumors suggest investigators are watching closely, trying to piece together a story that keeps getting messy. And in the middle of all of it, Diddy is pushing back harder than ever. According to reports, he and his family are gearing up for a lawsuit worth $1 billion, a move that shocked even his harshest critics. For someone who once controlled every room he walked into, this moment feels different. The power dynamic is changing. People who never dared to speak are suddenly talking, and every new voice adds another layer to a story that refuses to slow down. It's the kind of unfolding saga where nothing stays quiet for long, and every day brings another headline, another conflict, another person stepping into the spotlight with something to say. And the deeper you look, the more it becomes clear, this isn't just a scandal, it's a full-scale reckoning. And the next revelation might be even bigger than the last. For years, the story of Biggie's legacy felt settled. His music was legendary, his impact undeniable, and the people closest to him seemed united in preserving what he left behind. But almost overnight, that calm shattered. Suddenly, the spotlight swung straight onto a lawsuit no one expected, a legal fight that dragged Biggie's catalog, his family, and even the final moments of his mother's life back into public view. It all began when Faith Evans, Biggie's widow, was hit with a lawsuit from Barrow, a name many fans only vaguely recognized, but one that insiders say had deep ties to Diddy's circle. According to reports, Barrow claimed Faith was withholding profits connected to Biggie's catalog, money he said should be routed through a trust tied to the estate. On paper it looked like a routine dispute, but the more people dug, the stranger the details became. Barrow argued that Biggie's mother, Wallace, had agreed to sell her share of Biggie's assets while she was in hospice care. The timing alone set off alarms. If true, why was such a massive decision finalized when she was already fighting for her life? And why did the deal only come to light after she passed away? Faith, meanwhile, reportedly distributed proceeds to the only heirs Biggie actually had, his daughter, his son, and herself. To most people, that sounded straightforward. But Barrow insisted the trust he represented was being cut out, sparking a wave of suspicion about who was really benefiting from this battle and why. The deeper the public looked, the more tangled the situation appeared. Rumors online suggested that several figures connected to Biggie's catalog had originally been placed in those roles decades ago, not by the family, but by people aligned with Diddy. Whether true or not, those whispers took on a life of their own, especially once it became clear that the non-profit Barrow wanted the money routed to as an organization he reportedly helped oversee. Critics immediately questioned why tens of millions from Biggie's legacy would need to flow through a foundation controlled by someone outside the family, especially when there's little visible evidence of that money making its way back into the community. And just like that, the story exploded. What should have been a quiet, private estate matter turned into a public mystery, one fueled by court filings, questionable timing, and a trail of decisions that didn't add up. Even longtime fans who never doubted the people guarding Biggie's name began asking uncomfortable questions. Who really controls Biggie's legacy? Who's entitled to the profits? And why does it feel like so many of the same players keep reappearing whenever Diddy's name is involved? What makes this moment even more intense is how it connects to everything else happening around Diddy. Because just as this lawsuit gained traction, another wave of accusations, denials, and high-profile responses began swirling, pulling even more people into a story that now spans decades. And it turns out, the fight over Biggie's catalog was just the beginning. Because once this case surfaced, attention shifted to an even bigger question: who has been shaping Biggie's narrative all this time, and for whose benefit? But as shocking as this estate battle is, it's nothing compared to what came next, a move from Diddy himself that sent the entire internet into chaos. For decades, Biggie's legacy seemed to rest in the hands of the people closest to him. Fans assumed the family had full control, that every decision came from a place of love, protection, and respect. But once the lawsuit surfaced, a new question started echoing online, a question nobody expected to be asking this many years later. Who actually controls Biggie's legacy, and how did they get that power? The more people looked into the names behind the paperwork, the more the puzzle shifted. At the center of the controversy stands Barrow, a figure whose connection to Biggie wasn't exactly a mystery, but whose current role caught everyone off guard. Barrow wasn't just a manager or a business associate. Over time, he'd reportedly become one of the key overseers of decisions tied to Biggie's image, likeness, and catalog, a position many fans never knew he held. And this is where the story gets murky. Rumors online claim Barrow wasn't simply someone who drifted into Biggie's circle. Some believe he was originally positioned there through Diddy's network during the early Bad Boy years, a setup that, if true, would make his influence over Biggie's estate far more complicated than anyone realized. There's no confirmed proof of that, but the pattern raised eyebrows. Why did someone outside Biggie's immediate family end up holding so much authority over the late rapper's legacy? The non-profit tied to Biggie, the Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation, only added fuel to the situation. Barrow reportedly played a major role there too, which led people to question how money from the catalog, money meant for Biggie's children, could be rerouted into an organization controlled by someone with long-standing industry ties. If everything was above board, why did it feel like the same names kept reappearing in every financial doorway connected to Biggie? Fans started digging deeper, and what they found wasn't clarity, it was contradiction. Some claimed the foundation's community impact never matched the massive sums discussed in lawsuits. Others pointed out that Valletta Wallace, Biggie's mother, had publicly expressed skepticism towards certain industry figures years before. So how could those same figures end up gatekeeping the very legacy she tried to protect? The mystery only grew once details surfaced about Valletta's final days. Reports say she signed off on a major catalog deal while in hospice care, but nobody heard about the agreement until after her passing. That timing left people uneasy. Why would such a monumental decision be veiled in silence until she was gone? And more importantly, who was guiding those conversations behind the scenes? As these questions spread, the narrative shifted from a simple legal dispute to something far more unsettling: the possibility that Biggie's name, image, and music might have been shaped for decades by people whose incentives didn't align with the family's. Whether that's true or not, the uncertainty alone is enough to keep the internet buzzing. Because every time someone investigates the chain of control, a new layer of the story reveals itself. Some fans argue this entire situation shows how vulnerable an artist's legacy can become once powerful industry players step in. Others think this moment exposes long-ignored dynamics between the Wallace family, Bad Boy Records, and the people who helped manage Biggie's posthumous empire. But everyone agrees on one thing: nothing about this is as straightforward as it once seemed. And the mystery only deepened when Diddy himself jumped back into the narrative, not to protect Biggie's name, but to defend his own. Because what happened next dragged the entire conversation out of estate drama and straight into a billion-dollar clash with one of the biggest streaming platforms on earth. Just when it looked like the estate battle was becoming the biggest headline, everything shifted again. This time, it wasn't a former employee or a quiet court filing stirring the conversation, it was Diddy himself. And instead of issuing another denial or a carefully worded statement, he reportedly prepared something far more dramatic: a billion-dollar lawsuit aimed straight at Netflix. The timing was wild. Netflix had just released the doc-series that instantly dominated the platform, pulling in millions of viewers within days and sparking a global debate about Diddy's past. A wave of allegations, some old, some brand new, spread like wildfire. Stories of mistreatment, stories from former artists, rumors about behind-the-scenes behavior, and accusations that had never been spoken in public until now. For many people, it was the first time they had heard these claims at all. And while fans were still processing everything, reports began circulating that Diddy and several family members had lawyered all the way up. Not just with any legal team, but with some of the biggest firms in the country. Sources described the move as an attempt to create one of the largest defamation cases in U.S. history. To some, it looked like a desperate swing. To others, it felt like a message: stay quiet, or get caught in the crossfire. But Netflix wasn't acting fazed. The streaming giant is known for playing tough, and insiders claimed the documentary went through layers of vetting before it ever reached the public. If Diddy expected them to retreat, he miscalculated. According to reports, Netflix stood firmly behind the project, refusing to retract anything and signaling that they were ready for whatever legal battle came next. The tension didn't stop there. While Diddy's team pushed back, the people mentioned in the documentary reacted in wildly different ways. Representatives tied to Biggie's estate denied specific claims about the funeral. His mother's side rejected allegations about family abuse. Yet others, former employees, old collaborators, and people who claimed to have witnessed key moments, publicly voiced support for the stories featured in the doc. Some even suggested there was much more that never made it to screen. That split created a strange imbalance, a powerful figure fighting to reclaim control of the narrative, while former insiders hinted the truth was messier than anyone knew. At the same time, online speculation intensified. Would the lawsuit force Netflix to reveal its sources? Would people who once stayed silent be dragged into court? And most unsettling of all, what kind of evidence was Netflix ready to defend? The public didn't know which direction the story would go, but one thing was obvious: Diddy was no longer just responding to accusations. He was escalating. He was challenging a corporation with endless resources and a global platform. And that bold counterattack only pulled more attention to the very claims he hoped to bury. What made everything even more explosive was the growing belief that this wasn't just about a documentary. It was about control of reputation, control of narrative, and control of the countless stories that had been whispered for years. Because once the Netflix series aired, a door opened, and people who had stayed silent suddenly realized the world was watching. And that's when the former insiders began to speak louder, especially one voice that had already lived through the chaos and claimed she still had receipts waiting to be revealed. Just when it seemed like the public had heard every possible angle, new voices stepped back into the spotlight, voices that had been around Diddy long before the headlines, long before the lawsuits, long before the internet pieced together old rumors with new accusations. And the one name that immediately sent the story spiraling again was Chef Jordan. For years, she had been quiet. She never positioned herself as a celebrity whistleblower or chased attention for the things she'd seen inside Diddy's world. But once the Netflix series reignited the conversation, she resurfaced with a tone that was sharper, more confident, and far more urgent. She made it clear she wasn't there to entertain anyone, she was there to correct the record, protect herself, and speak on experiences she'd held in silence for far too long. What shook people the most wasn't just the content of her statements, but the consistency. She openly claimed she had been dealing with intimidation and isolation during the years after working for Diddy. She described moments where she felt watched, pressured, or pushed into silence, moments that, according to her, shaped the reason she held on to evidence she never released publicly. As she spoke, it became obvious she wasn't simply recounting random memories. She connected her experiences to patterns others had hinted at. She talked about punishments, power plays, and a culture where control mattered more than fairness. She spoke about people being denied rest, denied food, denied basic dignity when the wrong person got irritated. She didn't present it as revenge. She framed it as survival, saying that staying quiet had failed to protect her, and speaking out was the only real security she had left. Then came the part that sent the internet into a frenzy. She posted a photo outside a federal building, implying she had already been in contact with investigators and had attended meetings connected to a larger inquiry. She didn't name agencies or reveal details, but the symbolism alone was enough. People immediately speculated that something major was happening behind the scenes, something far bigger than a documentary or a defamation dispute. And when she mentioned that she had watched federal agents struggle to understand the culture of the industry, she hinted at something darker: the idea that investigators didn't realize how deep the patterns went. She claimed there were stories that never made it into the Netflix series, stories that weren't included simply because she didn't want to be exploited or sensationalized. Her honesty resonated with many. Her anger resonated even more. And the more she talked, the more other former employees, backup performers, and industry insiders began chiming in online. Nobody had the full picture, but everyone seemed to hold one piece of it. And that's when people started noticing something strange. No matter who spoke up, the same behaviors kept appearing in their stories. When different people with no connection to each other start describing the same things, the public pays attention. And that's exactly what happened. As the flood of reactions, stories, and insider memories poured out, certain themes surfaced again and again, not as isolated complaints, but as patterns. One of the most obvious patterns was control. Nearly every former insider described an environment where one person's mood dictated the entire room. If he was calm, everyone breathed. If he snapped, fear spread instantly. It didn't matter whether someone was a chef, a dancer, a manager, or an artist, the energy shifted around him like a weather system. Another recurring theme was secrecy. People talked about contracts that changed at the last minute, deals suddenly rewritten, and agreements that seemed to benefit certain players far more than others. Some claimed they were pressured into staying quiet, while others said they had to protect themselves because speaking out would cost them their livelihood. Even those who defended Diddy often raised questions without realizing it, because their explanations revealed just how many layers of business were hidden from the public. Then there was the revolving door of loyalty. Over the years, countless individuals had appeared in Diddy's orbit: friends, partners, protégés, employees, only to disappear without explanation. And every time one of them resurfaced years later with a new story, fans noticed the familiarity. The specifics changed, but the structure was often the same: isolation, pressure, control, and retaliation. Another pattern involved the people who seemed to hold power long after the spotlight faded. Figures tied to Biggie's estate, non-profit organizations, or old contracts kept reappearing in lawsuits, interviews, or leaked documents. Their names weren't always famous, but their influence seemed to linger across decades. And every time their involvement resurfaced, the same question returned: were they acting independently, or on behalf of someone else? But the most unsettling pattern was how often the truth moved slowly. It took years for some people to feel safe enough to speak. Others only talked after watching someone else step forward. And the gap between when events happened and when the world learned about them suggested one grim possibility: that fear had been a more powerful force than anyone realized. These patterns weren't proof of anything by themselves. But they created a map of influence, silence, and unresolved tension. And once people traced the lines, they started noticing gaps in the story. Gaps that hinted at something still hiding beneath the surface. And that's when the speculation began to grow louder than ever. As more voices entered the conversation, the public didn't just react, they started connecting dots. Threads from old lawsuits were lined up beside new claims. Statements from decades ago were compared to fresh interviews. People dug into business records, tax filings, and archived footage, piecing together timelines that were never meant to overlap. The speculation became unavoidable. Some online discussions suggested investigators were already circling the situation, especially after Chef Jordan's posts hinted at federal involvement. None of this has been officially confirmed, but the idea alone was enough to send shockwaves across social media. People wondered if the issues described by insiders were isolated incidents, or if they were part of something bigger that authorities had only recently begun to understand. Others speculated about the roles of longtime associates, individuals who kept appearing in court filings or estate documents. Why did the same names surface in matters involving Biggie, the Wallace Foundation, or posthumous contracts? Were they simply experienced handlers, or did they represent a network of influence that fans weren't aware of? Some even questioned whether the billion-dollar lawsuit against Netflix was really about defamation at all. They speculated it might have been a warning shot, a way to intimidate anyone preparing to share more information. After all, there were rumors that multiple people who worked with Diddy over the years had stories they never told publicly. And once the docuseries dropped, old barriers broke. People realized they weren't alone. What fueled the speculation most, though, was a sense that the story was far from over. Every week brought new claims, new denials, new contradictions. Some people defended Diddy fiercely, saying everything was exaggerated or twisted. Others insisted this was just the beginning, and the real revelations hadn't even hit yet. Whether any of these theories are accurate remains unclear. But the intensity of the speculation shows how deeply the public believes there's more to the story, more to the business deals, more to the family disputes, more to the allegations that resurfaced after years of silence. And as each new piece of information emerges, one truth becomes harder to ignore: this situation isn't slowing down. If anything, it's accelerating. What began as a quiet estate dispute and a controversial documentary has grown into one of the most unpredictable sagas modern entertainment has seen. Every thread of the story, Biggie's legacy, Diddy's reputation, insider testimonies, old contracts, whispered accusations, and new lawsuits, now intertwines into a narrative so chaotic that even longtime fans struggle to keep up. What makes this moment unforgettable isn't just the magnitude of the claims or the billion-dollar stakes. It's the sheer number of voices, each stepping forward from different corners of Diddy's past, each adding a piece to a puzzle that keeps expanding instead of resolving. Some defend him. Others challenge him. Many say they stayed quiet for years out of fear or loyalty. And now, for the first time, the world is hearing all these pieces collide at once. But the most fascinating part is that the story is still unfolding. Investigations may continue. More people may speak. More documents may surface. And the legal battles, both existing and rumored, are far from reaching their final chapters. Whether this ends with vindication, accountability, or something in between, one thing is certain: the truth isn't finished revealing itself. For now, the world watches, waits, and questions everything it thought it knew about the people and power structures behind one of the biggest empires in music history. Because every time this saga seems ready to calm down, something new erupts, pulling us right back into the storm.